What is going on, guys? Jeff back here with part number 4 of the Excelsior hood build. We are making awesome progress over the last couple weeks. We've been hitting this thing hard every single day, and I think we're getting close to wrapping up possibly by the end of the next part number 5. So as I always say, couldn't be more excited. It's looking great. We've only got a few extra things that we need to do, primarily just to strengthen it back up. All the design stuff is pretty much finalized and ready to go. But we do have a lot of work left yet to do to get it strengthened up and get it all ready to go. As I've said before with previous parts of this kit, it's one thing to design the parts, one thing to build the parts. It's another thing to ensure that they actually work the way that they should. So you have to always keep in mind that when you're making something and building something, especially for something like a car, you can design it and have fun with it and all that, but you also have to make sure that it's going to work and be roadworthy. You have to make sure that even with your new design, it's going to function exactly like it is intended to function, basically on an OEM level. So you never want to build something that's going to be dangerous or anything that could especially cause harm to anyone else on the road while you're driving. You have to keep all that in mind. So anyways, we're gonna jump right in here, but before we get started, I want to show you guys this sick shirt that I'm wearing. Hopefully you guys can see that. My lighting is kind of random today. This is Zailas. That's this car right here. A lot of you guys will know that who are following me on Instagram. This is Zailas in PZ V1 form. That is the first wide body kit that I actually made quite a few years ago now. 3 or 4 years ago, I made the first version of this wide body, and it is now on this sick shirt that was just released as a part of my new apparel brand that I launched about 6 weeks ago or so, called Battle BSM. Battle BSM is a passion project I've had cooking for quite some time, and I finally was able to get it launched this year and up off the ground. And essentially what it is it's an apparel brand that kind of features everything that I'm all about. You know, especially there's the cars, of course. That's huge in my life with this car. When I got this car 7 years ago, it totally changed my life, but I was into cars way before that too, so that being a huge part of my life, that's of course a part of it with cool stuff like this. But BSM stands for body, spirit, and mind, and we all have those 3 parts. That's what we're all made of. We're all made of a body, a spirit, and a mind, and the message behind the brand is to encourage and empower everybody to really strengthen all 3 of those parts, to fight the battle in this world, to become the best version that you can possibly be in all 3 of those categories. And so there's lots of cool stuff. There's gym equipment. Of course, I'm a big gym guy, love physical fitness, and strengthening the mind, of course, is key. So there's lots of wisdom, lots of cool quotes and stuff like that on some of the clothing and things like that. So go check it out if you're interested at all. Maybe just to cop one of these sick Zailas shirts. Right now, this is the only car-related design that we have going right now, but there's a lot more to come, so go check it out. I will leave the link to the website in the description of this video. Go check it out, cop a shirt, help me out, support me. That would be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. It will help me not only with this current project, but also with projects to come in the near future. Well, with that being said, let's get back to work on the hood. Let's go take a look at what we got going on. Alright, so here we are taking a look at the hood right where we left off at the end of part number 3. We had just established this new centerpiece that we decided to add right there just behind the new main vent that we've added, and already I can tell you that's going to be insane. I wasn't real sure that I wanted to add one of those. I was always on the fence from the very beginning of concepting the design of the new hood. Sometimes it looks really good on other hoods, and other times I look at it and I kind of don't like it, but man, I'm really glad I went for it because I think it really adds a lot more to this hood. It just makes it that much more special. So we left off in the last video with this just being clay, but I've gone ahead and already fiberglassed this, so it is rock solid and ready to go. We do have to refine it still, so we got to sand all this down along the edges here to get this nice and smooth. We will then of course be adding filler to make this a seamless blend from this center section to this new center area. And we have clay in here, obviously. This is a fiberglass shell essentially, so what we'll end up doing is we're going to need to remove the clay that's under this piece. So when we come up under the hood, open this up for you real quick. So taking a look under the hood here, we can see there's our clay that will need to come out. We also have all this extra fiberglass that's going to be trimmed off of the side sections there, and then we still have all the clay that's under here, so it comes back to probably somewhere right about here. So what's going to happen is we're going to have to cut this piece right here to pull the clay out from the bottom, and then we're going to refiberglass all of that from the inside so that it's nice and strong and all one piece again. So we did add a little bit of extra work by adding that center section there. That's all right. I'll get through it real quick. We just need to pull all this clay out and get to work. I can pull a little bit of it out right now. I'm actually going to go ahead and get started doing that underneath process right away. I'm not even going to bother sanding this down just yet because we actually need as much strength as we can as we pull out the bottom. I want this to be very strong until we get all the fiberglass done on the bottom. That way I know that as I sand this down, it's still going to be perfectly strong. So the first order of business today is let's trim down all this excess fiberglass. Let's pull the clay out of the front part right there and cut this back so we can access the clay underneath. Alright guys, as you can see, I have gone ahead and got all the clay out from the underneath. I also trimmed away all that excess fiberglass that was there. These will be trimmed up a little bit more to create an angle. It's not just going to be flat from this all the way back to here, but it's actually going to be cut up. If I look at it from the side, it's going to be cut so that it kind of comes from here and then it will angle up to the top section like that. So there'll be a nice little triangle cut out of that. I'll make sure that's symmetrical on both sides. But I went ahead and got all the clay out of there. You want to do this one section at a time, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to cut outside of where you fiberglass. Like, you don't want to accidentally make your cut out here and then you'll have to repair that. Just do one little section at a time. Take like one center section out and then work your way out to the edges from there, just taking your time as you go. Now once you get the bulk of the clay out, there's still going to be some clay residue on the walls and stuff sticking to the underside of the fiberglass, and what you want to use is like a wire brush, something like this, to then go in and just scrape all the walls, all the little corners. It's nice if you have a little bit of a longer bristle type like this too, where you can really get in all the little crevices, and this will knock out all that clay that's sticking to the walls really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and make my cuts to trim the sides up just a little bit more right here, and then I'm going to sand down all this outside area right here and get ready to apply our fiberglass reinforcement. We're going to be fiberglassing from the inside section right here and overlapping over to the underside right here. That's just going to be reinforcing this whole section so that it's not just glassed on the top, but on the bottom as well. That's going to make sure that there's sufficient strength all the way from the top through to the bottom. Alright, surprise, the hood is off the car. I actually decided that it was going to be way easier for me to actually take the hood off the car and do all the under the hood work while it's on the ground. This is going to make it so much easier to apply all the fiberglass that I need to, as opposed to trying to put it on an inverted surface where it's going to want to drip and cause all kinds of problems. This just makes it real simple because I can just lay it down flat just like this. So we've gone ahead and got started with the fiberglass on the center section there. I just went ahead and used 3 layers of just the cloth. I didn't worry about using matte. Just the cloth is sufficient, so 3 layers. You can see I overlapped just about 1 inch all the way around, so it's coming all the way through the recess, or in the recess, up and over the corners, and about 1 inch around all the way. I also went ahead and made sure to bring it up to the bottom section of the top as well, so it's nice and tight right there as well. This will be very, very strong once it's all cured up, so I'm very happy about that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start working on these side sections right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to pull as much as this clay out of there as I can, and then I will trim back all of this fiberglass right here. Probably anywhere between 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch will need to be cut back until I reach where the walls were fiberglassed. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. Pull all this clay out. I will probably trim this down also in the process when I get to trimming this down. So I'm going to get started with that right now. Alright guys, so I have gone ahead and removed all of the clay and made all of the trimmings that were necessary on the edges here, as you can see on both sides. I've also trimmed quite a bit more of this this attached lower section here, where I'm going to end up refiberglassing all of this. I'm not going to leave any of these open spaces, like you see this and all this in the front right here like that. That's all going to be re-walled off, but I cut it all the way back to exactly where I wanted so that it wouldn't interfere with any of the venting or anything like that. And what I'll end up doing is just using foam the polyurethane foam to actually create a nice wall. Can't use clay obviously in this case because I won't be able to get it out if I put clay in there and use a wall. I wish I could, but there will be no way to get the clay out. So I'm going to have to go ahead and use the polyurethane foam that I can just throw in there, fiberglass over it, and then I can just leave it in there. I don't have to worry about it. It's really light. It's not going to add any weight to the actual hood, and it will actually increase the structural rigidity a little bit too. So it does have that benefit. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and apply the fiberglass. I've already sanded all this down. You can see where I've sanded down with my 60 grit on the top section right here and also along the strip here. I'm just going to add all the fiberglass here, probably another 3 layers of the cloth, just like I did in that center divider section right there. 3 layers of cloth on each side, and that should be plenty of strength for right now. And then by that time I'll be completely out of light for tonight, so I'll have to wrap it for this evening, come back out here tomorrow, and I'll start to fill all those gaps and do the rest of the fiberglassing on the underside. Alright guys, we are back. It is the next day now, and as you can see, I have gone ahead and finished up my fiberglassing work that needed to be done here on the underside of the walls on both sides. That is now complete. You can also see on the rear section right there, I went ahead and filled those gaps with the polyurethane foam as I was describing earlier, and I've also put a skim coat of thickened resin in any little crevices or any extra gaps that the foam did not fill. So we are now ready to go ahead and fiberglass just to finish that up. Basically all I'll be doing is just putting fiberglass cloth from this top section down to this bottom section, just to make this a solid bond all the way across. So we are actually almost done with our under the hood work. I just have to do the same thing with this front section. I'm going to fill from here all the way through the front and up to that point right there as well. I'm going to find foam and fit it in there kind of like a puzzle. The foam is really nice and forgiving because you can shape it to pretty much any shape. So what I end up doing to get it filling in perfectly like that is, or as perfectly as possible at least, is I just take like a foam block or a piece of foam and I just press it up against here, and it will leave the imprint of the shape, and I'll just cut that shape out of the foam and then just keep pushing it in until it's a nice snug fit and flush right there. We'll just do that and then get that glassed up and do a little bit more of extra sanding, clean up. Like I'll take out some of this gunk under here where the resin just kind of built up a little bit too much. We'll sand that down and we'll put our glass on the back and the front section, and we will be done with under the hood work. Okay, so here we are. I have got the front section all filled up and glassed, so that's really nice and rock solid. We got a nice wall right there that's going to reseal the hood from the front end. I've also applied fiberglass on this back section as well, and I also went ahead and sanded down both of those sections. I still have a little bit more sand work to do on those, and then I've decided I'm going to go ahead and just do a light skim coat of body filler just to kind of clean it up. The underside of the hood doesn't have to be really pretty, but it still has to be presentable, because there are going to be some times when the hood is up and I don't want this disgusting looking thing underneath the hood. So I'm going to take the time to clean it up just a little bit more. I still have some sanding to do to get rid of some buildup of resin right here and to apply some body filler right there to smooth it out. And then after everything is nice and clean, then I'm going to actually go ahead and spray it back down with a nice black undercoating, something like that came on the hood when I bought it. This is actually just like I don't know if it's a primer or just a high temp undercoating that they have, but I'm going to go ahead and do that once everything is smoothed out and clean, just to make this look really nice and presentable. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be absolutely beautiful, but I do want it to look nice, you know, like so when you open the hood it looks like you could have bought this from a professional manufacturer. Alright, here we are. We have got quite a bit of work done here. It's actually a couple of days later since the last segment that you guys just saw, and you can see that I have gone ahead and smoothed down everywhere, pretty much every major area of the under the hood where we've done any work. So everything is nice and smooth in the front there with that skim layer of filler, and in the back as well. And you can see I've also laid up a couple of layers of fiberglass in the middle there in a nice cross section, and that's just to add a little bit of extra strength. When we did make our initial cut to cut the center section out, we had to cut this the under section that's right here that is attached to this upper section, and we had to cut that out and remove it completely. So I decided that I wanted to go ahead and just add a little bit of extra fiberglass reinforcement just to make sure that this is really strong and we add a little bit of that strength that we removed previously. In the process, I also went ahead and cleaned up a lot of the details around the edges here. I got rid of any excess fiberglass that we didn't need, made sure that everything was measured correctly on both sides, made sure everything was dialed in. This is all nice and smooth now and very strong. So at this point, we are pretty much done with everything under the hood that we need to do. Everything is smooth, everything is sealed for the most part, and it may not look very pretty, but like I said, doesn't necessarily have to be beautiful underneath here, just something that's semi-presentable, and I'm okay with where we're at right now. So all that's left to do now is just apply our high temp flat black base coat that we're going to do here in all of the areas that we've modified. We don't really so much have to apply any on the edges because that's already there from the factory when I bought the hood, and I don't need to double up on that. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply a nice coat of the high temp paint all the way around in all of these areas. We want to make sure that we're thermal protecting this thing, because when we cut the initial section out, we had to cut the bottom layer off, and that bottom layer does serve to help soak some of that heat that comes up off the engine, and because that's no longer there, obviously we want to make sure that we're protecting this main layer of composite right here from the heat that's going to be coming up, and we're going to be doing that with our Rust-Oleum high heat 2000 degree up to 2000 degree flat black paint right there. So it's really nice, resist gas and oil as well, so that will be helpful in case there's any splashing of any fluids under the hood. That will help as well. We just want to make sure that we have as much protection and strength as possible under here so that we can return it to OEM condition. So I've already gone ahead and done a nice light sanding, as you can see, just in the areas where our protective coating is going to come up to. I am going to mask off my little Sabon badge right there, and I want to preserve that just to remember what this was at one time, though it's drastically changed at this point. I do want to preserve my little Sabon badge there just for craps and giggles, but I'll go ahead and get it all dusted off and we'll throw on our protective coat. Alright, and just like that, we have our top coat fully applied over all of the areas that we did work on, and man, I gotta say, this thing dang near looks like factory. Tell you what, we maintained our little Sabon badge there as well very nicely. Very excited to be moving on from the undersection, because that means that the last part of this is just to flip the hood back over to the top side and do our finishing touches to the top side. That's going to include refining this center divider section that we fiberglassed up, and also sharpening up all of our lines on the top, making sure everything is good, sanding down any unnecessary filler and all that. So let's get to it right now. Alright, here we are back on the top section again, and when I flipped it back over, we of course still had this area right here that was just kind of raw fiberglass. Needed a lot of work, of course, but it was plenty strong enough both on the top and on the bottom for me to shape this exactly to where I wanted it. I didn't have to worry about this getting weak or anything or too thin, because we made sure to fiberglass on both sides, so we're good with that. I got it dialed in very, very nicely. As you can see, I got my lines completely straight. The angle on the sides is exactly the same on both sides, and I made triple sure that this thing was right in the center. If you look back here, you can see here's our original body line that we had established when we started the project, and I made sure as I was tapering this in that this lined up perfectly with that original body line and came out right to the center of the main vent right here. So we're looking very good. Also went ahead and took down quite a bit of the filler that was right here previously. I liked where it was, but I just decided that I'm going to go ahead and sand it down for a little bit more of a subtle type of a look, because it was quite a bit more built up along the edge right here. But after looking at it from the profile and everything, I thought it was just a little sticking up a little bit too much, so I went ahead and dialed that back down, and I really like this result right here. It's very, very smooth, and it has a great curve to it. As I lay my hand over the top of it, it is just a beautiful feeling curve. Again, I know you guys can't feel that, but it's a beautiful curve that raises up, and we still maintained our nice amount of thickness. You can see all of this thickness there. It's still a ½ inch of thickness along the ridge of the main vent there, so it's still a lot more aggressive than it was from the factory, but not so much so that it's kind of jarring to look at from the side profile. That also helped us too with removing the filler. It helped to remove a little bit of the weight. As I've said previously in this build series, we want to use as little filler as possible, and a lot of that has to do with how heavy filler can get very quickly if you overdo it. I went back over the whole thing, the sides, around the vents and everything, to make sure there was not any unnecessary filler. I still want this to be a generally lightweight hood, at least lighter than the factory aluminum hood. It's of course going to be a little bit heavier than it was initially because we've added a lot of fiberglass and there is going to be a filler on it and stuff like that. So it's not quite going to be as light as it was when it was just the original carbon fiber hood. But this thing is still super light. I can pick it up and handle it no problem, like it's no big deal at all. So I'm totally satisfied with the weight of it. But I'm just going to go back over again. I'm going to finish little areas. You can see there's still little things like this, just little bitty areas that still need to be touched up here and there. And then after I get those taken care of, we're going to go ahead and go over with our spot putty and glaze coat, and that's a kind of a red filler that's going to go in and fill any pinholes I may have missed. That's going to be our last step before we do a final sand down of everything and get into our primer on it. I still have to sand down all of this original paint that's on the outsides, on the edges where we didn't work so much, so we can apply primer. That's all this back here too needs to be sanded down. And man, I'm super excited because we're close. Okay, I have just gone ahead and sanded down the entire hood, fixed up all my little defects that were in any of the filler, and sanded away all of the remaining paint and primer that was on this hood, and it is looking awesome because the colors are starting to be all kind of similar now. I also sanded down the vents, the carbon sections, and I will end up covering those up again before we go in for primer. I don't want to prime those because I do want to expose the carbon when it's repainted again. So I'll be covering those, but we are so close. The only thing left to do now is just go in with our glazing spot putty just to do one last covering of filling any pinholes, any little dips, any little waves that may still exist in any of the fiberglass work that we've done. The glaze and spot putty is actually a critical piece of finishing anything that you make. I've used it on every other piece of the kit that I've made, and it's this stuff right here. And you have to do this. I guess you don't have to, but I definitely would recommend doing this before you finish any piece, because this is what's really going to make the piece get a great finish, professional looking finish, as opposed to something that looks, you know, kind of half-assed in the end. Because again, like I said, this is going to fill in any of the little pinholes that are hiding that you cannot see with your eye, and it's also, more importantly even than the pinholes, it's going to help you straighten out any areas that are not entirely smooth. So even if you run your hand over the whole thing and it feels totally smooth and you feel like there's nothing wrong, this will reveal it. It's like a guide coat. So it's awesome because it's also a filler, and it will fill imperfections at the same time as showing you where the imperfections are. So it's a great thing. Definitely use this, and it will save you a lot of headache and make your piece look a lot better. It's very simple to apply. You're just going to apply it the same way you would apply body filler, only you don't need a hardener. You can just squeeze it right out of the tube. Use the same kind of spatula deal and just lay it on in really thin coats, and then just sand it off. It sands super quick and super easy. So this is actually going to be one of the easier parts of the entire build, but one of the last parts. So I'm so excited. I'm going to go ahead and take care of this right now. Okay guys, and just like that, I have finished the glazing spot putty, and as you can see, there's a kind of a slight red haze to the whole thing. I at one time had this hood completely covered in the spot putty, and it is a red color to it, so that's why you see all this red. In the areas where you see it's particularly darker, those are those little imperfections that are in the fiberglass or whatever work, your filler work or whatever you did. Wherever you see after your glaze, anything like this, that's where it's just smoothing it out. It's filling in ever so slightly. This is literally so slight that you can't feel it with your hand as you run your hand over it. It felt good in just the fiberglass, but this is a perfect example of how important the glazing spot putty is because it just fills in all that stuff that you cannot see. So this is even more smooth now as I run my hand across. Really important also for areas like this. You can see all these little areas that's perfectly smooth, but that's exactly where there was little things I could not see with my eye that needed to be smoothed out, filled in on both sides. You can see, so great example of the importance of using the glaze before you prime it, go in with a whole glaze coat and make sure you're doing that all the way across your piece. And you can see where that has just doctored up so much, really all around the hood, especially like I said in these areas here. It's critically important. So I am so happy. Guess what, guys? We are pretty much done. The only thing that's left to do now is throw some primer on this puppy, and before we can do that, we of course got to wipe the whole thing down with alcohol, make sure there's no contaminants, no fingerprints, no oils, no anything on it before we can go in with primer. But it is all sanded down, it is wiped off, all the dust is gone, so I'm just going to go ahead and wipe down with alcohol and I'll throw some primer on it, guys. So man, here we are literally at the last part of this hood build. Just got to throw the primer on and then we are going to be all finished up. There will still be a few little things to do here and there after the primer is on. It's going to make all the lines pop out and everything, and that will give me an idea if there is anything to be adjusted line wise in any of my new body lines or anything that I did. Primer is always going to be the final thing before you need to make adjustments, and I think we're for the most part pretty good, but I always expect that there's going to be at least a few little things, and if that is the case, then I'm going to go ahead and handle that off camera. I'm going to go ahead and wrap part 4 right here, and then I'm going to open part 5 up with the fully completed, fully finished hood for you guys. I hope you're excited. I'm so excited to get primer on it and just see this thing, see all the lines. And this is my favorite part of making every one of these parts of this kit, is when I throw the first primer coat on it and I see all the lines and all their glory and everything is the same color. It's just unbelievable. So I'm so excited to get the primer on it and show it to you guys in part number 5. So please stay tuned. That's going to be coming up as quickly as possible. It really depends on how much work I got to do after the primer reveals everything to me. I'm hoping not too much so I can get it up quick for you guys, but thank you so much for watching up to this point thus far. If you've watched everything, thank you so much. Hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. Let me know in the comment section if you've been enjoying this build series. If you guys have, then I will definitely consider doing this with more stuff in the future. Alright guys, that's it for part number 4. Stay tuned for part 5. It's going to be the biggest one yet. Peace out and God bless.